No,
So I'm just kind of like majorly winging this.
well, that'd be cool because that'd be a learning curve. So once you've done one, it'll just get easier from there, and you might get the bug for doing it. Because
Yeah.
I think you should. I think the things you think, the way you think, how you talk. Yeah, the world needs to hear it. So perhaps this is the start of the next
Thank you.
chapter.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's quite a few people that I know that have expressed interest in listening to it. So yeah, I think if we get some good feedback about it and a lot of people like it, then maybe we could sort of sort of do it regularly and sort of talk about different subjects and stuff. I think this time we were going to go for sort of the topic of education from um, like a neurodiverse perspective. I think obviously I can talk from my experience and Reese, you can talk from your experience, but then I think Lynette has autistic children as well. So it's kind of got her own personal experience. And then as I know the experience of having autistic children who are in the educational system and the challenges that come along with that. I mean, not firsthand, but I know a lot of people who, talk to me quite a lot about this. There's a friend that I've got, and at the moment, her she gets a call like every other day from her son's school saying that he's climbed on the roof again, and uh he has autism, and so they found out the way that he got on the roof once, but they cannot find out how he keeps getting up there again. And she was saying to me like she doesn't understand like why he keeps doing it. Like, she said she thinks that he does it just so that he'll get sent home. But I mean, I thought, well, I mean, I used to do similar things like that at school, and if I was going to repeatedly climb on the roof, I would be doing it just because I could do it and nobody else could stop me. Nobody else knew how I was doing it, and it was something that it was like a place that I could go that nobody else could get to, where I was just, even though everybody could obviously see me on the roof, but also, I don't know,
Well, yeah,
I
and
just,
let's face it, there's easier ways to get sent home.
yeah,
You can just throw a chair. That'll get you sent home.
I did
That's what
try
I
and use
used to
that.
do. And
Yeah,
and then when I went home, if I wanted to climb a tree, I'd climb a tree in my own time.
yeah,
Not run the risk of being interrupted by people who don't appreciate the joy of climbing trees.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think there's multifaceted reasons, and the school's very typical response is to prohibit behavior rather than trying to be curious to understand what the underlying reasons why people do the things they do. Like it could be simply because he likes the perspective from up there. It might be like you said, because it's something he can do, no one else can do. Maybe he just enjoys the sensation. That there could be 100 different reasons, but until they've unpicked that, whether it's just escaping or whatever, that until they've got to the bottom of that, they're never going to resolve it. And if he's safe, then let him do it. But obviously, he probably isn't safe, or
No,
I probably shouldn't encourage such behaviour, should I? But I,
no,
I, I don't know that most school classrooms probably cause a lot more harm than falling off a roof, as far as I can see.
mm. No, I
Yeah,
think,
it's the kind of harm that doesn't heal, right? And
Mhm.
you're saying about the behaviors. I mean, behaviors. There'll always be a function of behavior. There'll be a driver, but of
Indeed.
course, a lot of people don't start from that bottom up. They start from this is a behavior,
Uh-huh.
and so the behavior gets judged rather than understood. And yet, when you learn about behavior, and maybe having sort of an ABC approach, looking at the antecedents, the behavior, and the consequences, that kind of classic ABC chart, you realize that there are functions of behavior, and one of them is to escape and avoid. The other one is
mm,
access to tangibles. Sensory feed can be a driving factor, and it's not a case of saying, well, which one is it? Because it could be all of them
Mhm.
coming together, but there'll be a function. And if it was purely sensation, great, get a climbing wall. Allow for that kind of sensory feed to happen in terms of climbing in a safe space with a crash mat. But it could be about being up in a tree, in which
It's
case
it's on the
climbing wall
roof.
wouldn't do it.
It's
Yeah, yeah,
on
yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, I think, but that's what you've got to do. Got to have that almost detective mindset to say, well, we're going to look at this, and it could be that you replace that behavior without losing what it's giving with a more controlled, safer activity that could present a good solution.
I
Yeah.
think I think it's again personally sort of looking at uh I think it's 14, 15. I think looking at 14 and 15-year-old James and looking at some of my behavior, especially at school, I think partially out of a desire to rebel because I didn't um, I didn't like the way that I was treated by figures of authority based on, the fact that I was different and that they didn't understand that and they would, I'd be like frequently like penalized and stuff like that, even when, things weren't necessarily my fault and I was actually trying, I was trying, but then I was getting penalized anyway, and it felt like, well, I can't do what you want me to do, so I'm just gonna do, I'm gonna do I'm going to do more of what you don't want me to do. I'm going to deliberately do, if you're going to treat me like I'm deliberately doing things wrong, then I am going to deliberately do things wrong. And so I think it was partially sort of rebellion from that perspective, but then also it's something that draws a lot of attention from other people. And as somebody who very frequently felt, um, like I didn't exist, like I was sort of invisible unless I was doing something really like outrageous. That was when people always paid me attention, and that was when, especially with that age group, that was when people actually showed me respect. Um, because I was doing something, fun and exciting that was different. And I personally, I felt like that was like a celebration of my personality and my differences, and that made me, it was like the act of doing that, especially the first couple of times that I did it, it's like all of the bad adults, don't understand and are just, horrible to me and like give me like zero chance to actually do well. Um, they're all like getting upset about this behavior, but then my peers, the people whose respect I actually, really crave, the people who I want to accept me, they're all like, "Oh my God, look, he's on the roof again! What a legend!" Um, but then also it's my own space. It's something that only I can do. And it's using my differences in a creative way to actually make me feel the way that I want to feel, make me feel accepted and connected and not invisible like I actually exist in the first place.
Yeah, and it's really quite profound because if you think through a lot of those ages growing up, kids, teenagers, absolutely love a rebel. So if there's something rebellious, something that is courageous and outrageous, all of these things will endear you to your peers, and at the same time they'll alienate you potentially from your parents and from teachers or people in authority. So that kind of that totally polarized view. And there's nothing in the middle. There's no middle ground for people like us. So you've got to pick one. And of course, if you become teacher's pet, and you'll get called a swat, you'll get called all kinds of things. You'll be alienated from your peers. What's more important? What creates more pain? And actually, having sort of been bullied by my peers, I'd take the frowns and the detentions and the suspensions any day, because the teachers, frankly, did sod all about the bullying,
Yeah.
and whether it was in school, because a lot of it was, or the dreaded time when you've got to do that walk of doom down this alley to get the bus where you knew stuff was going to happen down that alley, and then you knew you were going to be in a rolling prison called a bus where lots of other stuff was going to happen as well.
Yeah.
And then you'd get off the bus, and the only good thing is, as someone who regularly got out of PE, I used to get some incredible track and field exercise running for people to get to the safety of my home, you know. And then you just got to look forward to it starting again the next day. Yeah. So
Yeah.
what do you do? The time that I got the most respect was when I ended up punching my PE teacher square on the nose for trying to physically undress
I
me
wish I'd
to
punched
get
one of
me in
my
the
PE
shower.
teachers.
I got so much respect from well, actually from my father, which was interesting. I got lots of respect from my peers. I ended up getting expelled from school, but in the
Mm.
time it took to get expelled, the teachers also gave me a wide berth,
Yeah.
because they realized that I had something in me that they called a violent streak, and I'm not a violent person. I'm the most gentle person you'll meet, but that was fear. Fear to
Yeah.
imagine that in this day and age, a teacher tries to get your clothes off you. I mean,
Yeah.
you'd be in so much trouble. And yet, I'm the one who got expelled. Hmm.
Yeah. I think one thing that I always sticks out in my mind, something that I did at secondary school that won me quite a lot of respect from my peers was I brought a screwdriver into school, and I was just unscrewing bits of furniture because it was fun. And my Spanish teacher left the room for 5 minutes, and I unscrewed the legs from his chair, and then I balanced the top of the chair on the legs. So when he came in and sat down, he just slid straight off the back of the chair, and nobody grasped me up for that. So I actually got away with that one. But everybody thought I was a hero, and like people didn't bully me for like a week. So then I started like throwing oranges at teachers and stuff like that, and getting myself into loads of trouble. Um, but I don't know, there was less that the teachers could do to bully me, or at least there was less of them. So it was, I don't know.
That's interesting. Sorry, I had to step out, so I missed a little bit, but it was an interesting point to walk back in um, on PE teachers and Spanish teachers. Uh, I don't know. I don't know what you guys were kind of where you were going with your conversation before that, but I don't really have any comparative stories because I didn't really have that kind of experience. I've never been particularly somebody who would push back, particularly. Um, I wish I had, but I think I didn't really have that kind of I don't know. It's just not my style of doing things, I guess. But I think for me, some of the teachers were pretty cruel. But I think that it was really for me, it was the peer problem that impacted me most. And I don't know if that's something to do with the sort of social culture of girls or whether it's just the way things were. But I went from being able to be quite anonymous when I was at the younger school. When we went to, I spent most of my time in the primary school just hiding in bushes, having my own or create my own world. And then when I went to secondary school, you can't be anonymous. That's what I found. You can't get away with trying to hide. You're noticed if you stand out even slightly. You're noticed, and that is basically how the story of my secondary school experience went. It became more and more obvious that I was an easy scapegoat because I didn't really conform. While my peers were all getting into pop music, I was diverging into interests on things like Marx Brothers and silent movies and vampires and random things that I was into back then. And it just made me stand out quite a lot. So I was bullied quite a lot. So that was kind of you know, some of my experience really. I did really bad at school. I failed really badly. I got one GCSE in drama, and I hate drama. Failed my art. I was just, yeah, it was not a good experience. Left me with more trauma than it did academic qualifications. And, you know, I guess for me, any academic stuff I might have achieved has happened definitely later on in adulthood, that I've done out of my own volition, not anything to do with the education system that I feel completely let me down. It's not
Yeah.
built for people that cognitively process things differently. It's not actually built to look at the way people process information differently. It doesn't look at creative thinking. It doesn't look at problem solving. It doesn't actually try to find a way to build people to be the best selves. We're just being economic drones. And it you know, as you say, as me being a parent of autistic children as well, it's a devastating thing to watch your children being penalized and
Tortured.
coerced by a broken system. It's awful.
It's really interesting. I mean, you got one more GCSE than me, by the way, because I had none. But so you should feel like you're in the lead there, perhaps. But
Drama.
yeah, yeah, drama. But the interesting thing is, so if you sort of if you think of Ofsted's sort of like the rhetoric that comes out, they talk about cultural capital being really important. So that whole cultural experience that kids have, you know, and the critical life skills that they're going to take with them. And, you know, when you're taking sort of trauma and it's affecting you and affecting you deeply, you know, as you move into adult life, well, then the system has failed. But although he's not perfect, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, quite a famous, philosophically driven Frenchman as an educator, um, had this idea that kids being kids and playing and being allowed to grow in their own direction was a really important part of education. And the time that he was saying this, you know, everything was becoming systemized and performance driven. And so it was you know, perhaps ahead of the curve there. But it reminds me of the two sort of like words from Greek, in fact Latin origins originally, and they're educare and educare. So you know, Educare, Educere, so educare and educare, and educare is training and molding and almost like pumping in knowledge. And that's what the education system currently does. It pumps in the information that's on the curriculum and then tests you to see if you've retained that information. Whereas educaring, on the other hand, actually is based on drawing out and developing inherent potential, critical thinking, which is what you know you were talking. So you know this idea of well, who are you? What lights you up? How do you work? You know what's already in you, what that great stuff that's in you. Because you know if you think about it, education, you pop out the end of it, and if you're mainstream, you do okay. But there's nothing to separate you from anybody else. The bit that separates you from everybody else is what you then do as you move into adulthood, as you become you, as you self-actualize, you know, as you start to grow your own way. And you know, no great people were created in school, you know. But of course, if you're carrying the encumbrance of all of that trauma with you, you know, you've got those layers to unpick, those barriers, those barriers that we, you know, those intrinsic barriers that form like calluses on our spirits that act as a prison, you know, and that can take a lot to, you know, to remove that so that you can actually grow. A bit like a little fish in a bowl that's far too small, or a plant in a pot that's far too small. That you know it's only going to grow when it's you know got the space to grow. And that's what education needs to do, is to sort of think of, rather than just that educare, that educare approach, of drawing things out of people, and saying, well, yeah, what are your intrinsic strengths? What do you love to do? And let's really cherish that and not kill it out of you. Like with me on my art, being told my pictures look like a child's painting, or why are you getting mess everywhere, all over you, all over the floor? Great, turned me right off, Um, but it wasn't the subject, it was the delivery. I had
Yeah.
great stuff in me, I had great art in me, I had all kinds of greatness in me. And I'm just glad that they didn't totally kill it all away.
That's it, isn't it? It's the creativity. It doesn't necessarily mean what you produce. It's having that in you, that drive, that way of thinking, because it's that allows you to see things in such a different way. And it goes back to that chat or the scenario you were talking about with going up onto the roof, really, doesn't it? It's like what's happening there? How do we nurture that and build on that to help that enable access to the education system, rather than using it as weaponize it against them, which seems to be the thing that happens. I get that they've got rules and all that kind of guff, but it's I just they're so restricted in their thinking, which is ironic given what they say about autistic people. It never ceases to blow my mind. I don't know. I'm rambling, but it frustrates the hell out of me. I was worried when we were going to talk about education today, because I've been in a very ranty mood this week, because I've had a bit of a run-in with my daughter's school, because they're talking about attendance and all this kind of stuff. And I'm so traumatized by my experience and my children's experience, that when I get that kind of stuff, it makes me so cross, because
Yeah.
it's wrong. It's
I
wrong.
think hearing what you were just talking about, Reese, I think that's it's an interesting it's an interesting idea, because I think and I mean this applies to all children, not just neurodiverse children. I think it's so that there's an extra kind of layer to it for, the more different somebody is, the more kind of the deeper this actually goes. But I mean, certainly speaking for myself, and I feel, fairly confident speaking for everybody else at secondary school. I think, you know, people between the ages of, as early as like 8, 9, 10, until as late as, I mean, at least 25, like, I think people's real priority it's not education, it's finding out who they actually are. That's what I wanted to know. That was what I wanted to find out. That was what I've always wanted to know. And I mean, it's only in the last couple of years. I mean, I've recently turned 30, and it's only in the last couple of years that I've actually really finally started to find out who that was. And I think part of the reason why it took me a bit longer, it wouldn't have taken me this long if I wasn't in active addiction. But then I did learn quite a lot about myself through that process. And if I hadn't been through that, I wouldn't have found the recovery process that I've been going through in the last couple of years. And I've learned so much about myself through that, and what I actually want from my life. And now that I've actually realized what that is, I feel so much more fulfilled in myself, and I've got, so much more ambition and so much more confidence. And I feel, for the first time in my entire life, I feel like a genuine connection to a meaningful future, which is something that I never had before. And that, when it comes to, the spiritual well-being more than anything else, that is absolutely imperative. Um, and I think. I mean, it's essentially, I mean, my experience throughout my life until that point, especially when I was at school, and especially when, when I went into college and then got kicked out, and then, the first career that I had for, however long, I was just trying to survive. Um, that was all I was trying to do. I was trying to meet other people's expectations. I was trying to, do well enough to earn enough money to live comfortably and to do some of the things that I wanted to do. And like every single day, it was just survival, survival, survival. And I never had any of that time and space to actually work out who I was and what was important to me and what I wanted to do and how I was going to get there. And it wasn't until I ended up getting signed off and I didn't have to work and I actually had the time and the space and the freedom to work that out. But my life has changed and I'm now in a position where I'm actually able to, really contribute to society instead of just work at loads of different restaurants and get fired and annoy people and hate myself. And that was, that was a process that started throughout school. That was what was reinforced in me as I was growing up and going through school and learning to navigate the world as an adult, which is essentially the purpose of the education system. Is the information that they teach you, like a lot of it is really important, some of it is not so relevant to a lot of adults in different situations depending on what they choose to do. And I understand, like, a lot of the curriculum is there because some people do, they want to give everybody a bit of flavor so that people can try different things and then work out, gradually as they go into college, they choose like a few different subjects and then, or for GCSEs and then in college. And then, if you go into higher education, then it's a lot more specific. And then that's to get you into a career. And on paper, it doesn't look like a bad system, but there's so much more sort of underneath that's, so much more important that there isn't really any sort of framework or support around. And one of
There
those
is,
is
and
developing social skills to interact with the rest of society, because you can't do a job without being able to do that. And that's especially when your teachers don't understand you and you're just like, well, what the hell do I do? Like, it's it just feels impossible.
and what you're saying about the system, there's part of the system. I understand the curriculum, the need for it. It's well developed. I actually haven't got a problem with the curriculum. What the problem is the sole focus on outcomes. And I think league tables have done a big disservice. So, how many students have hit this bar? How well have they done? And the way that they're measuring that, nobody is measuring happiness. So imagine, I'm not going to use the word fail, but imagine not getting many GCSEs, but the school going out of the way to make sure that socially, you were getting on. There was enjoyment, dare I say, happiness. There will be growth in there. They may not be able to do everything for your particular way of learning at that point, because don't forget as well, chronological age and developmental age for many autistic individuals may put us at 3 years behind our peers. If you're an August baby, as I am as well, you're already sort of chronologically behind them. And development, a year, 2 years, it's a big gulf. It's not when you're 25, 30. If you were like a 30-year-old with a mental age of a 25-year-old, it's not going to make any difference. But that's part of the problem. They don't focus on happiness and that kind of well-being as a measure. But they should, because imagine if all else fails, but you've got a happy, well-adjusted child, young person, then there's a chance to then go, well, I'm really interested in X. And that passion, that drive, that interest in that thing, you can do that at college or university.
Sorry
Oh,
about
Yeah,
okay.
I was just saying that people don't realize how hard it is for an autistic person to make themselves do something that they don't want to do, i.e., not interested in. And where people sort of say to you, well, everyone has to do things that they're not interested in. I don't understand how people can make themselves do that. It's like it's if I'm some kind of a programmed android cyborg, whatever I am, it's not in my programming to make myself do things that I don't want to do. So you got to find ways, like if someone had have said to me, right, we're doing a science lesson, but the subject on the science lesson is Star Trek, I'd have been like, right, I'm in, I'm totally in. And you could do maths, you could do science, based on these interest areas. And if I was your teacher, James, and you were throwing oranges, I mean, apart from the fact I'd find it hilarious, maybe I shouldn't be a teacher, but I'd say, James, I'd say, number one, did you actually hit, how good was your shot? Did you hit the teacher?
I was
Um,
throwing
that,
it
that,
at the picture, yeah. So if
yeah.
you were getting
So
hit with the orange, you might not be happy about it.
yeah, yeah. So I was at last, I go, okay, and I go, why an orange? And you might say, well, actually, it's softer than an apple, and I'd be like, that's just quite nice of you, because it could have been a coconut,
It was
and
what I had in my bag. And being obsessive compulsive, it was an orange the first time,
you
so
know,
it's got to be an orange all the other times.
Times, yeah. So but I'd have a conversation with you rather than like vilifying the behavior. And and I'd acknowledge the fact that you've got a courageous, rebellious streak. I might sort of, if Simon was right, I might say to you, we need to try and find a way to channel this, and have a conversation about it rather than do that whole, how dare you, boy, all of that kind of stuff that teachers do, which is not going to work. It's just going to put you in that, combative mode, So I don't know what
Do
the
you know?
answer
Do you know
is.
what that just made me think of? I mean, I just thought like if a teacher did turn around and respond like in not only like a kind but like a supportive manner when I'm literally throwing things at their head every time they turn around, I would have felt so bad. I was like, how am I ever going to throw an orange at this person again when they're being so lovely to me? Like I just can't do it. It reminded me of the last time that I ever hit somebody. I was 17 and I'm not going to go into all the details, but this particular person was very manipulative and abusive, and they were in a relationship with one of my friends, and they were very, very horrible to them. And my friend kept going back, and it was this really bad cycle. And eventually, it got to the point where I was like, no, I'm just going to punch him. And so he, I saw him, and I walked up to him, and I punched him. And his response was to stand there and be like, "Mate, like, why are you doing that?" And like, he was so like nice about it, and like, but that's because that's what he was. He was a really like manipulative, horrible person. But that's the way that he responded to those issues. But because he was being so nice about it, even though I knew what was going on behind there, and like he genuinely like. It was like he believed that he was completely innocent and he hadn't done anything wrong because he said like, well, why have you done that? And I said because of because of this and like this and this, and he was like, I haven't like he just was utterly bewildered, and it's like it was such a bizarre experience, but like I was still angry with him, but it's like I just I can't be aggressive and violent towards somebody who's being so kind and understanding of the fact that I've just hit them. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, it's true, and I think if if someone has a conversation with you, they're nice, maybe bring some humor into it, which is always quite good. And then just ask the question, purely be interested and say, just really need to know why you hurling oranges, and you might say, I don't know, and then you could be like, well, cool. I mean, maybe have a think about it, Well, you might know, and you might be brave enough to say, but either way, having a conversation with somebody is that what's going to happen is you're going to have more conversations like that. And like you say, when you are a compassionate person, your behavior is driven by, a need to fit in, and you found out that you do start to fit in, and you're loved by your peers for doing that stuff. If that's the driver, then something's got to happen that you still get that,
yeah,
but do it in a way more sort of productive way, but without
yeah,
that judgment. It's almost like, okay, we've got to modify this behavior, but I'm going to punish you for it. What's the point in that? It's obviously somebody that needs help, needs support, needs to feel part of something, needs to feel accepted. If I were a teacher, I would first thing I would feel is maybe sadness that somebody has gotten to that point, and yeah, I would just be full of compassion for them, really. I wouldn't be in that kind of got to punish that. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, yeah. This and makes me think of the prison system as well. And like it's supposed to be about rehabilitation, but it's also supposed to be about punishment. It's like I don't understand how you can combine those two things, like punishment and rehabilitation. It doesn't make it's so counterintuitive. If you want to rehabilitate somebody and reintegrate them into a society that they have done harm to, but society started it, society harmed them first, do you know what I mean? And continuing to to punish and harm them even whilst you're saying that you're trying to rehabilitate them, it's like
It's messed
it's
up, isn't it? It's
it's
totally messed up.
madness.
It doesn't make any sense.
Mm,
I think I'd be like you, Reese. If somebody threw an orange at me, even a bit hurt, I'd still find it quite hilarious, which is another reason why I wouldn't be a teacher either, because I laugh at the most inappropriate things. Perhaps if you'd thrown a coconut, I might have been a little bit more upset. But then when you said about the coconuts, all I could think about is Monty Python reference. So I think I'd probably deal with it that way and try and understand, unpick the reasons why somebody's hurling coconuts and find out if they're trying to find out about unburdened swallows and what have you. But I think I I think the lack of curiosity, the lack of compassion, and the fact that people are seen as their labels, not as who they are as people, is a big part of the problem for me. That I remember when one of my children who used to run away from school, used to climb fences, used to do all sorts of things to try and escape. When one day I was told by a neighbour that they were seen running along the beach, because I lived near the beach obviously at the time. I went to the school to find out what was going on, and I had to search for them. I found them, and when I went to the school, they said, "Oh, we didn't even know that they had gone," which is a bit of a worry. And they sat me in the staff room, and on the board in the staff room there was one of those big whiteboards. There at the top it wrote "children to look out for," and my child's name was on the list. And I'll never forget that, because that's what they go in with, that narrative straight away. This is before they even know, they won't even get to know my child. They won't ever try to understand them. They just wanted to. They just manage behaviors, and that's their fixation is in that. When they said the teachers and the support workers wanted to do to get training to do restrictive practices to restrain my child, that's when I said, if you do that, please tell me, because I'll be removing them from your school. But in the meantime, what they did was they locked them in a small cupboard-sized room for 2 weeks with somebody watching from the outside every day when they were at school. And I didn't know about this until my child disclosed it to me. And that was when I finally removed them from school. And that's the kind of trauma that I can't live beyond, because that's my child, that's my world, that's what they've grown up with, knowing that that's their worth in this world. And so when I hear you guys talk about your experiences as a parent, I can only say it breaks your heart to think, and that sounds really trite. It's not, for me anyway. It's not. Like, my children are everything to me, and to think that their worlds have been destroyed because of a few manipulative, power hungry people, it's just unbearable. Yeah, I saw you smirk then because I was being very careful not to swear, but
Yeah.
it's
I,
hard.
I was wondering if I should mention at the start, like whether or not people think it's appropriate to swear, because I find it quite difficult to swear. Me and Reese both have Tourette's, um, so I don't know. I feel like I don't feel like there's an issue with a bit of swearing. Um,
Well, you
Yeah,
could,
it's always going to offend some people, and
mm,
yeah,
so I wouldn't want to offend anybody. But for the same token, when you're being real, and you should be real, I think it's absolutely fine to swear for emphasis, swear because it just oops, can't help it. I mean,
yeah,
I'm never offended by that. I mean, so sometimes you're in an environment where you've got families around with kids. So this is what when I go to sort of open mics. One of my Tourette's triggers is as soon as a microphone is in front of me, when people do that testing, testing, 1 2 1 2.
yeah.
So for some reason it's become embedded that I say testicles, like literally I sing testicles, and testicles in quite an operatic voice. And a few times there have been families around with kids, and you see them looking, oh gosh, is this going to go really downhill? I mean, luckily it doesn't go too far downhill, but I think people have got to sometimes be offended by all means, but when you learn more, remove that that offense, and be offended at yourself for being offended, I reckon.
Yeah.
And I was just saying what you were saying about the prisons, James. And what you said about the locking in the cupboard, which does definitely sound like a prison. I think that's probably in breach of various rules anyway. But this kind of paradox between sort of punishment and rehabilitation, I think the missing ingredient, the missing link, is remorse, true remorse, acceptance for what you may have done, acceptance and redress for some of the pain that you may have caused. And I think these are really important stepping stones on the way to rehabilitation. And if somebody has true remorse and somebody is ready to re-enter society and contribute, I think the only final barrier is, if you've murdered somebody, potentially the family won't want you ever released. But if you look into it and you look into the background of that person, and they were perhaps massively traumatized as a kid, failed to buy the system. Why should they be punished forever if they really are safe and they really are, ready to come back and contribute? I think they should be, but I know it's a very difficult subject to debate because, of course, not all crimes are seen as being equal. And you've got crimes that are mala prohibita, evil because they are wrong in the law, and then you've got crimes that they would term as mala in se in Latin, which is evil in itself. So, of course, the crimes that are on the mala in se list are, killing, raping, all of that kind of stuff that everybody knows somehow is just wrong in society. And it's never that simple, of course, but that's what people would say is mala in se. Whereas mala prohibita, the law is currently saying it's wrong. And you haven't got to go back far in time to find that in every single place that makes up the UK, it was unlawful actually to be a homosexual. I
Mm.
mean, we wouldn't even countenance that ridiculous idea now that you're going to jail because you're gay. I mean, that is just absolutely ludicrous. So that's not evil in itself, but the law says it's wrong. If you speed in a 30-mile-per-hour limit, and you go 38, yeah, you've now not broken, the law so much as you have, done something illegal. It's an act of parliament as opposed to law. So you get a fine, you get points, whatever. But you could be doing the same speed. If you knock over a kid, suddenly you're evil, and you're probably going to go to jail for that, and you'll be vilified. But the amount of people that have sort of sped in a zone for whatever reason, doesn't make him evil. And this is where the law can be such an asshole sometimes, because it's all just so open to interpretation. Consequences. Consequences will tell you whether someone's evil or not. But when you oversimplify it, why can't people be forgiven? Or can they? It's a genuine question. So yeah, I like what you were saying there. So I've gone off topic a bit, but then again, it sounds like a lot of schools are operating under prison rules.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
maybe
I
it is
was
on
just
topic.
I was just about to say that. I mean, the fact that we've accidentally gotten onto the subject of the criminal justice system whilst talking about the education system just
It's
that says
quite
it all,
telling.
doesn't it? Yeah, yeah. But now talking about road traffic laws, especially, did you know it's actually it's completely legal to ride a horse down a dual carriageway under the influence of cocaine or heroin or anything other than alcohol. So long as you don't have any of it on you, you're not breaking any laws at all by doing that. And I find that absolutely ridiculous. But then, like you say, it was illegal to be a homosexual, and it's just I guess it's not necessarily something. If it came up very often, like there were a lot of issues with people doing that, then they would have made it a law. But still, um, I did want to mention. Sorry, that was like semi-relevant, not really relevant at all, to be honest. I wanted to mention going back to the fruit thing and the coconut. I mean, both of you said that you'd find it funny, and I think depending on the circumstances. If I'm in the right frame of mind, if I'm in the right mood, then yeah, I would have a laugh about that. I would respond in a compassionate and understanding way. But if I'm overstimulated, especially if I'm close to a meltdown as it is, I'm there's no compassion in that response. That's one of the other things that I did want to bring up. I know that you touched on it earlier a little bit, Reese, by talking about throwing chairs. And that was throughout my school experience, that was by far the hardest thing for me. Because obviously I mean, the combination of the what some people would refer to as poor impulse control from having Tourette's, and also that is associated with ADHD, um, the overstimulation and the sensitivity to a lot of stimulus related with autism and ADHD, and kind of also other little things. Having OCD, uh, just certain little things that aren't necessarily, they're not overstimulating, but it's not right. It's wrong, and so it's just, for example, um, I used to work at I used to work somewhere in a kitchen somewhere, and I have like a thing with like certain things, like I don't know what it is exactly, but certain things like I don't want to touch, um and so somebody had bent a spoon to put it in the sauce pot, to make it into like a little ladle sort like type thing, because I thought it would make it easier. And so I couldn't see the spoon under there because it was like covered in sauce, and I took it out and I was like, oh my God, like I didn't want to touch it. Like it was, you know, it's difficult to describe the sensation exactly, but it was like it's like the equivalent sort of response as if, you touch something like slimy or gross or something like that. It's like, no, like don't want to touch that. And so because people noticed me do that and they were like, oh, that's weird, like they'd stop deliberately bending the spoons and putting them in the sauces that I couldn't see the spoon through. So that, it's a really stressful shift. I'd pick up the spoon and it would be deliberately bent, and that would just, that would gradually push the gauge further and further and further. And so there were so many different things that were contributing to that other people identified that were so easy for them to take advantage of without looking like they'd done anything wrong. Because, you know, objectively, all this person who sat next to me at school is doing is having, something that's next to me on a desk just very slightly like at an angle onto my desk. And that for me, that's like a really, that's a big issue. And then, there's the lights and there's other people talking and trying to focus on things, and then, smells, everything, and it's all building up, and people noticed that these things had that effect on me, and it's almost like they're like, oh, what's going on here? And it's like, felt like I was like a wild animal, and they're just all like prodding me until I go absolutely nuts, which happened on a regular basis. And then they realized, oh yeah, if we all wind James up, then he'll go mad and he'll throw a chair, and it'll be much more interesting than learning about French. And so let's just do that whenever we're bored. And then obviously the teachers just looked at me and they're like, they can't see any reason why I'm doing that. They're like, I mean, everybody else is sat under the same light. Like, I didn't even know what some of these things were. I didn't know how to articulate that or express that. I didn't understand why other people weren't bothered by these things.
I think that's really important. It takes me back to what you were talking about before, a bit like the building up of autonomy and the importance of learning about yourself to be able to
Mhm.
build your autonomy in your vocabulary for that kind of stuff, and the Doppler effect it has on stuff, because like we were saying before, the behavior that happens as a result of all of these accumulative things are all anyone ever sees. They don't see the initial thing that starts it. And
I
you,
think the sort of, sorry to cut in,
no, I
but
cut in on you.
the end sort of result for it, I mean, the lasting effect that that's had on me, which is something that I'm trying really hard to address as an adult, that I'm making some progress with, but it's very difficult, is it's the feeling that, especially in large groups of people, I'm never going to be safe, and there's always going to be people in that group that want to try and hurt me, that don't want me there, because I can see that I'm different, and I can see that I don't belong there. And it's obvious to me, but nobody else seems to say anything about it. So I go into a new situation, and even if everybody's really kind and they're welcoming and they're friendly, I'm kind of sitting there and I'm like, well, who's gonna have like the issue? Who's gonna start to try and push me out first? And if nobody does, then I'm like, well, why? Like, obviously, like everybody sat around here in this room, everybody can see that I'm different. Everybody knows that I'm different. It's blindingly obvious. Everybody knows that I don't belong here, because I can see it. It's obvious. I don't belong here. It's a fact. And why is nobody else addressing that? Why is everyone pretending that I do? And it's like, when you're younger, and I definitely experienced, and I know that quite a few other people experienced, when other kids pretend to be your friend just so that they can humiliate you. And that's how it feels. It's like these people are pretending to accept me just so that they can hurt me even more when they reject me. Um, and it really, when I'm looking for that, it really affects my behavior and the way that I interact with other people. And then, like, the result is that I behave badly towards other people because I'm scared, I feel threatened, and I want to try and protect myself. And especially, as a man, it's very easy to learn, to respond to that with anger. Because anger is that's how you protect yourself. That's how you keep yourself safe. You don't cry. You don't have any other emotions. If anything goes wrong, like, you just get angry and you sort it out that way. And that's what men do. Um, and even though I think that's a load of shit, everybody thinks that that's a load of shit these days. But nevertheless, it's something that is still perpetuated.
Yeah,
Um,
because there's always truth in some stereotypes. That's the
yeah,
thing. Stereotypes like incomplete thinking. What you're talking about there is really interesting, because if you think of Howard Becker's labeling theory, that how labels that society place on us can become self-fulfilling prophecies, notwithstanding that we become hypersensitive to certain situations, and that can, that's when we internalize it. So, this idea of internalizing labels and expectations that become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And Howard Becker really did some influential work on that. And he kind of split it into lots of categories, including the internalization. Deviance, it had a really interesting view of deviance as a social construct. When you actually realize that, you realize that it is a construct. Of course, if the consensus is saying this is acceptable, this isn't, things tend to flow with the consensus. And then he talked about amplification of deviance, where when we internalize those behaviors and put those expectations on ourselves, and it can actually exacerbate that deviance. I'm going to say deviance and not sort of talking about, it's like when you use the word normal. I'm not talking about the kind of colloquial thing. I'm just talking about, moving away from that kind of idea of the mainstream norm. And then he even talked about, which you might find interesting, social control. He was really getting into the criminal justice system and how it can contribute to that kind of deviance, as opposed to, to making it better, which is what you were talking about earlier. So yeah, I mean, if you've not read some of the work by Howard Becker on labeling theory, it's still so relevant today. Really interesting.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think what are you guys what are you guys thinking? Have you has anyone got anywhere to be or
I don't at the moment. I don't know what I'm thinking. I'm thinking lots of things.
yeah,
Whether I can coherently actually share them or not is another thing
yeah,
altogether. I think
yeah,
I think that the trouble is that the education stuff feeds into so much else that you've talked about sort of the whole male stereotype and those kind of gender conforming roles that we have, or safe places, managing fear, all of, and the labels, all of those things, being autonomous, all of those things, that they they're all very relevant to education. But when most normal people, if you want for a better word, talk about education, I can't imagine anybody actually going into such deep ethics and philosophy about human existence. They'd just be talking maybe about curriculum and some of the
Policy.
yeah, exactly.
yeah,
So
yeah,
we are talking about something that's much bigger, and I don't think that that's unusual for people that think like us, and that's kind of the point, isn't it? Is that we don't see it in the reductionist um, molecular way. We see it in much bigger, broader understanding, and I think that's the problem with the education system, quite frankly, is that it tries to reduce us to cogs, and I don't think it
Yeah,
works.
non-conformist deviance. Yeah.
I, I do think in a way,
I might get that on my CV.
hearing
Sorry.
you hearing you say that, I think for me, definitely, and I know this applies to a lot of other neurodiverse people that I know, and definitely ones that I don't know. Um, I guess the easiest way to explain it would be um, when you hate yourself for being different, you identify yourself as different, and you hate yourself for being the way that you are and not being like everybody else. then it's much more, the question of why am I the way that I am is much more present on your mind than somebody who doesn't have, the negative um, relationship with themselves in that same way. And that was something that, you know, for me, that showed up at a very, very early age, and for pretty much as long as I can remember, I've been wondering why am I the way that I am? Why do I experience things the way that I experience things? And then, in a wider sense, like if I'm thinking about why I'm different and what those differences are, then I have to think about, well, why are other people the way that they are? And then, I start to think about that, and I look at other people, and then the differences between them, and more people, and the relationships between them, and the way that these things develop, and the way that people understand themselves and each other, and the way that they feel and the way they respond to certain situations, and kind of make correlations between different things. And I think that's really helped me to sort of develop a really good understanding of other people, and to become quite intuitive, and also really, really reflective. And those are some of the things that I the most grateful for, like the sort of traits, like the things that make me who I am. Those are some of the things that I am really the most grateful for. And I developed those skills in an effort to protect myself from other people, to make myself feel safe without just being angry and causing destruction. And those things have really enabled me to build some really valuable relationships, and to be able to offer support to other people, and to make a positive difference in other people's lives. And that's that's the fundamental thing. um that's the person that I want to be. That's the influence that I want to have on the world, and that's what I want from my life. And so, as much as all of this stuff was horrible, I wouldn't be the person that I am um without it. And I'm really, really lucky and really grateful to be able to sit here and say that actually I do, you know, I'm happy. I'm happy with what I've got. I'm happy to be exactly the way that I am. And even when, for such a long time, even when I hated myself, I never wanted to be anybody else. I mean, I'd feel like I wanted to, sometimes in a certain situation, like I'd have an experience of a situation because of something that was different about me. And if that thing wasn't different, then I wouldn't have had the negative experience that I had in that situation. And so, viewed through a very narrow lens in those, from those different contexts, I'd be really annoyed with myself, and I'd be beating myself up, and I'd be thinking like, oh, I wish like I could just do this. I wish I could just be like this. But then every time I took a step back and I looked at it, I'd be like, well, the thought of being someone else is absolutely terrifying, because I'm comfortable being me. I just wish other people were comfortable with me as well, but I can't, I've had to learn to accept that I can't control other people. I can't control the experience that they're going to have of me. All I can do is to do my best. And I think that also kind of extends to it's a perspective that I've articulated in that way to myself, and come to understand in that way, by thinking about through my journey of addiction and recovery. Um, because through my recovery, I've had to recognize and learn to address a lot of the issues that I used to use, so that I didn't have to address, like I could just cover it up for X amount of time whilst I was, you know, whilst I was artificially changing the way that I felt, so that I didn't have to feel however I felt before, and I didn't have to deal with what made me feel that way. And it's that was the solution. But obviously I've lost that now, so I'm going through the process of learning to understand, and approach these issues in a positive way. And a lot of that boils down to changing my behavior, and mostly changing my behavior with towards other people, and through that my relationships have gotten so much stronger. And that's that's what recovery is about. It's not about staying clean, it's not about not using, it's about being the best version of yourself and doing the best that you can every single day with what you've got. And that perspective has taught me so much. And so in the same way that um the things that I've learned from the horrible experiences that I had growing up, being a neurodiverse person, um, the things that I've learned, are the gift of that experience. And in the same way that recovery is, that process is the gift of addiction. And even though it was horrible, and from somebody else looking in, like nobody would want to go through any of that. But if I hadn't, I wouldn't be where I am now. And yeah, I'm I just wouldn't change any of it. I wouldn't change any of
I
it.
don't think you should. I mean, I hate to think of you having experienced pain, obviously, but I kind of almost wanted to celebrate a little bit when you said, you wouldn't want to change who you are. And I don't think, I think it's actually really cool to be able to think the way we do, to experience the stuff you have. I think obviously I can't imagine, and I won't pretend that I can imagine what you've been through. I think I've dealt with things in a different way, but possibly for very similar reasons. I think um, I think I think it sounds like all three of us are very reflective, and we've learned that as a way of navigating and understanding humans and the way they behave and interact, like you said. I think I I I like that. I like to be analytical and reflective and to really think about things like that. I know it annoys a lot of people, and I don't think it's made me a lot of friends, but I don't it to be honest with you, I'm at an age now where I don't really care,
Yeah.
which is quite nice. It's probably the only good bit about getting to getting to my age. Um, but yeah, so I don't know really. I think it's cool.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, what you were saying earlier, like living authentically versus living inauthentic. Living inauthentically has been proven to be really damaging, in the long term, sort of wearing you down over time. And I know we can't all do what we want to do, but and if we do, we've got to accept the consequences. So it may be that certain behaviors turn you into a social pariah. Well, we've got to own up to that and go, right, well, can without living inauthentically, can I modify my behaviors to be, less like Marmite? As long as we don't kill the kind of the nature of our beings. And I think that people, sheeple, who are kind of trapped within the confines of average and mediocrity, all of the great people are usually outside of that. There's nothing mediocre about them. They're like a shining beacon in a sea of mediocrity, where they're different enough to be polarizing. But that's exactly why they're great, and I wouldn't want to be one of those conforming sheeple. I couldn't anyway. And if I could, I think that's one of the things that would damage me. And I think the consequences of some of that is it probably pointed me in the direction of sort of some serious suicidal ideation, in the past, which I'll never revisit. I know that, and when I think about it, it wasn't about wanting to kill myself. It was wanting the pain to stop, and there are way better ways of making the pain stop. Fortunately, one really effective way is self-medication. And I think when you get through all of that, I think it does make you a better person. When I think back, exactly what you said, I've embraced that journey, no matter how painful it was, because it's a big part of who I am now. It's a big part of, when I meet people, such as yourselves, where you're like, okay, this is my tribe, these wonderful, broken deviants like me. Yeah, I just love that word, deviant. And I don't say it as a negative thing. And yeah, I thought it was hilarious as well. This is a really authentic recording because basically, I don't know what you're like with time management. I can't do it. As part of what my autistic gift is, I have no freaking idea at all. So I think it's hilarious that we've crashed the free Zoom allowance as many times as we have, and it's not anything like a surprise. I think it's wonderfully authentic. So I applaud you for that.
I think one of the well, the main reason why I wanted to do this with you two was, I mean, a big part of it was just I wanted to introduce you two and just see what happened, because I know the main thing that I really relate with both of you on is our kind of like reflective thinking. And I've learned a lot from both of you, from slightly different, you've both got your own unique perspective on, you've both got your own experiences on, neurodiversity. More sort of the biggest sort of crossover is autism, obviously. But I've had, I've learned so much from both of you, and you know, through that, I recognized, you guys could learn so much from each other as well. And I thought that there could be some real value in us, like to other people, if us three just, I mean, like Chris said, the couple of times that we met up to sort of discuss like some of the content for the training session that we did, and Chris he'd just sit there with a smile on his face, drinking his coffee, and we'd just go like off on some tangent, and both like sit there and get really, really angry together, like really passionate. And um it's something that I've done with Reese as well, at the end of like tutorials and stuff like that, or and even during like I'll look at a question on one of the assignments that we're discussing, and then I'll be like, oh yeah, maybe I could come at it from this, and then I end up talking for like 20 minutes, and then Reese will come back afterwards, and he'll have some really useful insight on what I've said. And because I'd had that same experience with the two of you, I really, really wanted to get you two together. So I'm really, it's gone like perfectly, like exactly how like I was hoping that it would go in my mind, which is also really satisfying for me because I was right. This is what I thought would happen, and it happened, so I'm right.
Well done.
Yeah, you're
Just
right. And are we forming a band? So I want to know.
We need we
I
need
can't,
we need a team name.
I'm not musical, I'm afraid. I can appreciate music, I can't play it.
Are you gonna be a band manager then?
We got to name the podcast as well. We got to come up with a team name.
Deviants.
Uh, the Bunny Rabbits.
I mean, you try and get the name Deviant in there somewhere.
The
Yeah.
Deviant Bunny Rabbits. This is
I,
getting worse.
the reflective deviant bunny rabbits. Um,
Yeah.
Now, I was just going to say, I feel like I've learnt loads from you as well, James. So I just wanted to put that out there as well because, I've bumbled along in my own little bubble for a while. So whenever I meet other people, kin, if you like, it's great because those conversations don't just mean that I get to learn your story, your narrative, and everything that you've gained and all those insights that you've got that are really valuable. It also triggers that sort of further reflection within me as well. So there's always stuff to grow and learn from, in my opinion. And it sounds like there's loads that we could definitely. I look forward to getting to know Reese a bit more. I think I feel I'm always a bit sort of nervous when I meet people, so I'm not sure at the moment.
He is